Hello and welcome back to TWTV for another video verdict coming from the affluent part of West London, Chelsea, where we've just watched another Ipswich Town game in the Premier League, and I'm joined by Phil Ham and Kallum Brisset from TWTV. TD, boys, welcome.
Hello. Yes.
And we've got a very interesting game to talk about because Chelsea 2, Ipswich 2, in a game where there were plenty of chances, plenty of action. And before we start, we want to talk about being in an affluent part of London. We're playing against a very affluent team because reading up before the game, Chelsea are packed full of stars. And that's not surprising, seeing as over the last 5 years, their net spend is £784 million, which makes us the highest spenders in the Premier League over that period. So quite something. And I think we'll pick that out as we talk about some of their players and how they've done. But let's hand over to you, Phil. They've had 5 wins on the trot at home, Chelsea. It was an important game for them because they're obviously vying for a Champions League place. What did you put in the match report? What did you make of the game?
Well, it was a sort of pulsating encounter, wasn't it, really? It was, talking to a few reporters in there, you could never really, you're sort of constantly writing something because there was a chance at one end, there was a chance at the other. When it started off with sort of, after the first couple of minutes, Chelsea was just constant Chelsea pressure, wasn't it? It was, and Town sort of really battling to stay in it. I think we'd kind of almost forgotten that the post was hit within that phase, wasn't it? We just sort of hung in there really during that period, and then scored with we'd had a couple of attacks, hadn't we? Mainly free kicks, but I think it was our first kind of sort of break, I suppose, and down that right flank, and Ben Johnson did really well. Cucurella, he kind of just stood off him too much, really, didn't he? I think, should have got there. A low cross, and then Ciso sort of deftly sort of stabbed it or poked it across the keeper and into the corner of the net, which was terrific. It gave us kind of something to sort of hang on to at that point. And I thought for a little spell after that, Chelsea, they didn't change too much, did they? They sort of got back into their stride fairly quickly. But then we scored the second, didn't we? Which, again, really, really nicely worked. And I think we've sort of mentioned that George Hurst, his role in the goals should not be overlooked because although he didn't get an assist in either of them, he did a lot of the groundwork to send Ben Johnson away on the first one, and the second to get the ball to Jack Clark, who fed Enciso, who returned the favour to Ben Johnson with a cross that Ben Johnson headed superbly across the keeper.
It was a great finish.
Yes, and it was very. The only shame was he didn't do the same at Crystal Palace a few weeks ago when he had a very similar opportunity. So 2-0 half time. I think probably a key moment was them scoring 18 seconds after the break. I think because you got the impression their fans were starting to turn a bit in the first half, and they were losing a bit of their composure. They didn't seem to have quite the same belief that they'd had earlier in the half. And I think if we'd have kept it to 2-0 going further into the half, then a bit more dissent and a bit more kind of they'd have kind of sort of drifted out the game a bit more. But as it was, they scored that goal, and then it did kind of it sort of went from one side having an opportunity to the other side having an opportunity, and at the end that was a strange sort of paradox in my report at the end, really, was that I thought that Chelsea tired towards the end, and yet Alex Palmer had to make 2 really, really good saves at the end to keep us to keep the point for us. So I think a draw ultimately the right result, and I think although we were 2-0 up at half time and ultimately drew, I don't think anyone was actually too unhappy at the end, and I think most Town fans went home with a bit of a spring in their step and a song in their heart. Yeah,
it was good. We were in the shed end behind us at Stamford Bridge, and the away end was glorious again. I mean, how was it coming across in the press box? Because it was brilliant in there today.
Yeah, Phil mentions the away end at the end, and I think you can tell by how it looked that it was a point that I think was well received.
Yeah, and a lovely interaction with the players and the manager at the end as well. We've seen that a lot, but I thought today was really happening. Obviously, the news of McKenna will come to a bit later, but it was a good connection. Coming over to you, Kallum, and just picking up a few things. It was interesting for me that in the first half, before Hurst break releasing Johnson for the first goal, we were a bit loose up front. We were giving the ball away a bit too cheaply again, which is a story of the season. But at the same time, Chelsea were giving us a hell of a lot of space between our midfield and their centre-backs, and it was working. So just before you give your own view of the game, Kallum, let's just look at the stats, because I think these will be quite interesting. We only had 26% possession, but we had 5 areas of momentum in the game, if you know what I mean. So we had 5 areas of actually good attack, good momentum in the game. We had 13 shots, they had 34 shots. Wow. We had 4 on target, they had 9. Our XG was 1.14, their XG was 2.14. Clear-cut chances, though, 3 for us and 4 for them. Yeah. So, and I want to, beginning of the second half, I should say, Hurst had 2 fantastic moments, didn't he, as well?
He did, yeah. You touched on George Hurst there. Those 2 chances were about a minute apart in that second half. There was one, what one was the first one?
It was a beautiful curled shot.
Just wide of the far post. We were right behind that from the view that we got. And then he headed down wide when it was
sort of stooping header. I'm sure he's scored a goal like that at some point in the past.
Yeah, I'm sure he has.
Wet ball scuffed off his head, I think. It was one of those.
That's not to say that George Hurst didn't have a huge role in the first 2 goals, like Phil said. With no assist for him, but he had a significant part to play in both of them. The first one, it was him that kind of drove us up the pitch, leading to the ball across for Johnson. And the second one, it was him that won the flick on that allowed it to get to the feet of Jack Clarke. We thought Jack Clarke had perhaps taken too long with that one. It was that pass across to Enciso that was flagged for offside. Yeah. Once we got one look at the replay, it was pretty conclusive that it was onside for that one.
It comes back to Phil's point, doesn't it, about you must have been typing away at the keyboards quite a lot because there was so much incident. And you're right as a VAR, and I thought he's offside. And then when it came up the screen, he was quite...
Yeah,
he's well on, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was semi-automated. Obviously, coming in from this weekend, you saw the kind of animation. Clear as day. No arguments about that one. It was just a shame that we couldn't hold on to it, and that's kind of been a story of the season, isn't it? Holding on to Leeds. It's 27 points now that we've dropped from winning positions, which is the most in the division.
Yeah.
But like you say, at the point where it is 2-2, yes, we were 2-0 up, but we were hanging on at the end. I know we'll touch on some individuals in a minute, but Alex Palmer, for me, man of the match. I think there are a lot of contenders going into the last 15 minutes or so, George Hurst being one of them, Ben Johnson being another. But I think the last 15 minutes swayed it the way of Palmer, who I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yeah, I mean, they really left their shooting boots at home, didn't they, Chelsea? Because they had a hell of a lot of shots in good positions. But I think, overall, the blocks were going in, weren't they? I'm not sure if you remember an excellent block from Morsey, excellent block from Kajust.
Yep.
So, we were throwing ourselves on the line. And, I think in the week, McKenna and Morsey had both asked for, let's end the season with a bit of fight and a bit of, let's go out in a bit of style. And, I think we saw that today.
The players and the management, they've accepted that the season's going to end how it's going to end. They're not pulling wool over our eyes. They know that we're on the way to relegation. There's no way of brushing that up. But it's about showing that fight, showing that we can compete. We haven't got the right result on the end of it too many times this season, and ultimately that's why we are where we are. But to show that we can come to places like this, we can give Chelsea a good account of ourselves. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I thought the energy was there today. And Phil makes a good point. I thought we were going to tire, but actually it almost felt like Chelsea were tiring in the second half. Let's talk through the team selection because it's changed today.
Yeah. So 3 changes. Leif Davis came back in for Connor Townsend, which I think is probably quite harsh on Connor Townsend. I think how many times have we spoken about him performing admirably and kind of not putting
I like what he did when
wrong.
I liked what he did when he came on.
I thought it was an excellent substitution at the time as well. There was a block on the line to getting in front of Enzo Fernandez when he looked destined to score. That was at 2-1. Just a shame. We could be standing here talking about that piece of defending from Connor Townsend as something that's earned us all 3. Unfortunately, it's not to be. But
let's keep going through the lineup.
But yeah, the other changes were they up front. Liam Delap, there was a lot of talk going into this game. It was kind of the big narrative. Is it an audition for his next club, perhaps? Will he be playing his football at Stamford Bridge next season? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, he had a rib injury that Kieran McKenna said he was pretty fortunate enough that he could make the bench, to be fair. A lot of other players wouldn't have made it, but he made himself available. when he came on, he put himself about, didn't he?
I was going to say, that didn't look like someone with a rib injury because he was barnstorming, wasn't he, again?
Maybe again, point to prove, perhaps.
Yeah.
And where was the other change? It was
Broadhead dropping out.
Clark coming in. Yeah, and I thought Jack Clark looked lively. He picked up the ball in that pocket that you mentioned earlier, quite a lot between the midfield and Chelsea's defence. It was obviously his layoff that led to the Enciso cross for Johnson's goal, which was the second one. I thought the changes were good. I thought the changes were, they looked like they worked. And there was no one in the 11 that I can kind of fault in terms of an individual performance today.
Yeah. Your man of the match was Palmer.
Alex Palmer. Yeah, there were three. I mean, in the last 10 minutes, he made 3 extraordinary saves. There was one from Trevor Chalobah, formerly of Town, of course, who kind of headed it down from a couple of yards out, and somehow Palmer gets himself in the way of it from point-blank range. There was another from Cole Palmer, his namesake, tipping that one round the post, and then Enzo Fernandez again at point-blank range and deep into stoppage time.
And he saved the best to last, because that was the best of the three, wasn't it?
It felt like those three got better as they went on. Yeah. And kind of the two that he was beaten by was one from a yard out that ended up going down as an own goal, and frankly a stunning strike from Jadon Sancho for the equaliser that was right in the top corner.
And dipped under the bar.
And woke up the locals that we'll come to a bit later. Yeah. Let's hand over to you, Phil. Let's talk about Delap to start off with, because it was a real narrative before the game, and I'm not sure if you're hearing some of the songs of sign. I think all the Ipswich fans was asking him to sign a 10-year contract. I think it's probably a little bit hopeful.
Good away end while he was warming up.
Exactly. But take us through, who do you see as the performance today, Phil?
Best performance today, I think Palmer again. Just for that last period, Hurst in first half, Enciso in the first half as well. I think goal and assist, and Johnson. O'Shea at the back again.
How many times have we said it?
He's having a really strong end of the season, isn't he, O'Shea?
Season.
I thought he picked up a groin injury. Did you see that for a while? He was struggling a bit.
Yeah, he overstretched, didn't he? When he went,
he went out into the touchline, didn't he?
Went
over
the touchline.
That's right.
So he might. But I think he's looking very good, isn't he?
Yeah.
And I know kind of we talked about maybe clubs that are maybe in a similar position to us, maybe coming in for him next year, but. Actually, you could possibly see clubs slightly higher up coming in for him, because he's a very, very solid performer. He's got pace. He's got leadership.
Spread the word.
You need to hold on to some players.
That's true. He has done very, very well. I think again, as Kallum says, really, it's difficult to, it's slightly childish to pick out any individual in a performance like that, because it was very much a team display, wasn't it? And the manager, of course, you have to look at the manager. He's played 4 games against Enzo Maresca over the last 2 years, and not lost.
You're looking ahead to some of the 3 key words, guys. You're picking them out, so we'll come to them. But I think for me, Palmer, you've got to stand out just for that save at the end and some of the earlier ones you mentioned. But again, I thought across the pitch there was some good performances, a lot of fight. I do think we were quite loose in the first half. We were making a lot of errors. There's a lot of cheap turnover in that first 20 minutes.
Kieran felt that Town were better in the second half than they were in the first.
Interesting, right.
I spoke to Ben Johnson. He picked out the second half performance as well. Maybe not quite in the same way, but he was certainly very complimentary of that, and that was obviously the half where we conceded the 2 goals rather than scored them. So I thought the performance was good in that second half. It was just a shame in the way that we let the lead slip again.
Kieran talked about the quality of the chances we created, which sort of comes to sort of your point about 4 shots on target and 3 shots on target, whatever. And you look at the chances we created, they were really quite good chances. Whereas you look at a lot of Chelsea's chances, I think it was 30 whatever shots, or whatever. A lot of them were Neto, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Shooting from a long way out, I think wide, high.
I think what you're saying, Phil, is that I was alluding to how many shots they had and not having the shooting boots. But you're right, many of them were very high over the bar. They weren't as clear cut as some of the ones that we managed to carve out ourselves.
I think we kind of, and actually, that's perhaps something we've not done an awful lot this year, is create a lot of decent chances within a game, and actually we did today. And George Hurst, we disappointed not to have taken one of those. And Jack Taylor at the end with his 2 opportunities as well.
So let's move on. Just actually closing out the players. Subs came on. I thought Taylor was like running around like a lunatic, wasn't he? He put a real shift in. Shame about Philogene. He looked quite a bad knock. Did Kieran mention anything about that?
He thinks it's MCL.
Right.
And he'll have a scan, and I suspect it's probably the last we'll see of him this season.
Right,
And
sorry to hear
we'll
that.
see him in pre-season, and he'll miss the European Championships with the under-21s. So yes, a blow for him. Really, I mean, literally, it was
He was on the pitch a couple of minutes.
71st minute, and he went off in the 75th.
He
I
was
think,
on the
didn't
pitch for 5 minutes.
Yeah,
but
and he
was
tried
down
to run it off, didn't he? And then he went down. I was very disappointed the Chelsea fans didn't clap him off when he came off. It was,
a bit
it was
harsh,
a poor,
bit
it was a poor
harsh.
moment, I thought. I think they'd got into their heads that we were time wasting. And what I've never seen a yellow for time wasting for a keeper given so early
Quite
as that.
early,
I mean, was that
yeah.
midway through the first half, wasn't it,
Yeah.
or something
To
like
be
that?
fair, it was probably the third time he'd done it, to be fair. I don't think there'll be any complaints about that.
Yeah.
Let's move over to the forum to sort of use the 3 words that Homer123 puts up to sort of get a kind of pick out some of the things you've already actually alluded to, guys. So we'll start with Scuzzer, a great name. We can compete.
Yeah, I think we can. Well, yes, I think we've shown this all season, haven't we? That we can compete, but unfortunately, we just haven't turned enough of those games in which we've competed into victories. So yeah, it's yes, I suppose it's a sort of the season in microcosm to an extent that we've performed well and competed against them, but still haven't come out with 3 points. Even though it's a side like Chelsea, which a draw against Chelsea is a very, very, very good result for a team.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it.
So,
They have such rich talent. When the big screen was showing the subs or their lineup, and then the subs come up, and you're going through, and it's like Sancho you mentioned earlier. It's an incredible squad of players they've got.
It's remarkable.
But-
So I think so. Just to to compete against a team like this is a huge achievement.
Yeah, and competing better than the other 2 teams that have come up, I think, as well. Moving on to North Suffolk Blue, lead lost again, Kallum, which is something you sort of mentioned up. You mentioned that. Can you repeat the points?
27,
Yeah,
which is the most in the Premier League. This is a separate point to the last one, but again, it's another microcosm of the season, you have to say, in terms of that's happened far too often. Because we haven't had a problem, we haven't had an issue in terms of getting in front in games.
Yeah.
It's just when we're maybe required to sit back, the opposition need to come out at us because they've got no choice, they're losing the game. Feels like the quality eventually shines through. Sometimes this season it's been down to tiredness, substitutions,
Subs.
being so
Strength.
strong.
Yeah.
Today I don't think it was that. I think it was just a case of, even in the first half when we were 2-0 up, at some point you felt that Chelsea would kind of break forward and score at some point. They did far too early in the second half for everyone's liking. And then the equaliser kind of, like I say, it's a good bit of individual quality. There's nothing you can kind of pin on that one. Could you get out to Sancho from the short corner quicker? I'm sure there's little.
it was just a moment.
There'll be
of
little
qual-
aspects,
quality.
but it was an excellent strike.
It was a very raucous away end, and we all came back into our seats at half time, and everyone was like fired up. And I remember saying to the guy next to me, let's just not concede early because the home fans are turning.
So it's your
Phil's mentioned this. Yeah, exactly. Jonah moment. But as Phil mentioned, I think the home fans were really they were losing them, weren't they? And it just did. It really bolstered them up again, and they had a little bit of noise for the first time. Last of the 3 words, it's from Gainsborough Blue. Kieran owns Maresca, which I think is a good point. Phil, do you want to build on that? You mentioned it earlier, but I think we did seem to have our shape was right, wasn't it? The way we'd set up was right.
Well, I think also last season Leicester were the sort of a Chelsea, as it were, within the Championship. The Southampton, Leicester and Leeds were the kind of Manchester City, Chelsea and Arsenal of the Championship. And so whereas we were the team coming up. And so it was a sort of similar scenario in a sense. Slightly different narratives in the matches, in that the 2 Leicester games last year were almost identical, weren't they? That they dominated for long spells, particularly in the first half, and then we gradually took over and the last 20 minutes dominated and then scored an equaliser late on. The games this year have been slightly different, haven't they? Whereas we've kind of, I suppose in a sense, the similarity was that we kind of soaked up a lot of pressure, but rather than sort of them going ahead and us coming back into it, we've caught them on the break and in transitions or whatever, and got our noses in front in at the game at Portman Road and then again here. So I think tactically you'd say that he has got the measure of him. He knows how to play against his teams, I think, even if ultimately we didn't get the 3 points today.
And I wonder how Kieran McKenna would fare with that kind of richness of team. You know what I mean?
I reckon he does.
Yeah, I think he probably does, because there was a massive difference in squad quality, but I think that, as you said, the battle between Maresca and Kieran, he won it, and we had a bit of we outthought them in a few shape moments and a few
and it was
passages of the game.
interesting. To a guy, a journalist sat next to me in the press conference, and we were talking about the record against Leicester, which he has no reason to. He didn't remember that, and he was looking at the game as sort of McKenna and Maresca, because McKenna had been interviewed for the job last year when Maresca was as well. And I think from what I gathered at the time, Maresca was always the first choice. So, but an interesting little kind of subplot within the whole thing.
Absolutely. Okay, so we talked a little bit about, what are the attributes to win Premier League games, Kallum? And I thought today we've said that press, duels, taking chances are pretty key, and I thought our press was good. We were doing well in the duels, weren't we? I thought especially in the wide positions, the fullbacks were doing pretty well. Got beaten a few times.
They were the most dangerous players with the two wingers, particularly in the first half. Neto and Madueke, everything seemed to go through them. As the half wore on, Cole Palmer was kind of getting more involved in the kind of centre of the pitch, as they perhaps realised that they weren't getting as much joy down the wide areas, which I guess is testament to how we defended. Yeah.
So let's close out talking about the game itself. So let's talk about the ground and the atmosphere. I haven't been here for about a decade, I don't think, but it's a cracking little ground, isn't it? It feels quite compact. Thoughts? Is it your first time here, Kallum?
No, I was here earlier on this season.
Yeah, and what do you think of the atmosphere?
It's always difficult to judge it, isn't it? Because it's obviously, the game's a big game for them in terms of for what they're fighting for. Ipswich at home isn't a cup final, and particularly with the way that the game was kind of going, with kind of the early couple of goals for us, the crowd was becoming quite restless. But when they kind of got fired up during the second half, particularly when the equaliser went, you felt like the stadium was ready to go and watch the team go on and get a winner.
I think Phil mentioned that we managed to not let the game get away from us, did we? And in a way, they didn't fire up the home team, if you know what I mean. We did sort of hunker down and keep them out, if you sort of mean. And I think that was important, because I think if it had become a bit Alamo-like, we might have been found out a little bit, I think. Okay, so we no longer need to really think about the Survival League, because we are down. We'll be playing Preston and now Birmingham next season, and Blackburn and alike. But just looking at the teams around us, because I think it's important we finish above Leicester. They finally got a goal in a 2-2 draw away at Brighton. Two goals. And they hadn't scored for 13 hours, which is quite remarkable. But we've kept the gap to them to 3 points, and we've got a significantly better goal difference. I think it's -11, isn't it, over them? And Saints held out for a while, but then got battered by Villa in the end in the 3-0 home loss to Aston Villa. So, we are still looking good to finish on top of those. And that's important, isn't it, guys? I think. That's an important goal for us for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think regardless as to the finishing position, even if for whatever reason Leicester do finish above us, I think you'd say out of the three of us, we're probably the best equipped. We'll go down with the least amount of bad noise surrounding us. But you'd like to see that on paper on the league table. So yeah, finishing 18th is kind of the goal from now. As sad as it is to be saying that with 6 games to go, that's the reality of it.
But to get a point from these 3 tough games with Chelsea, Arsenal and Newcastle. Newcastle looked very good, by the way, against Man U earlier. But yeah, I think it's good to have got a point already in this period. I think it's good to try and go out with a bit of fight. And,
absolutely.
And Phil,
I was just going to say, I don't think you could see Leicester or Southampton putting on that sort of performance against Chelsea today, because Leicester certainly don't look like they've got an enormous amount of fight in them, do they? But also an important point you made, actually, coming sort of the goal after half time and conceding the goal in that circumstance and then getting their crowd behind them and all that kind of stuff. That's quite a difficult, and not letting the game get away from us as we perhaps did against Manchester City and Newcastle and 1 or 2 others. I think that's quite an important thing and quite a tough second half to have. It was that
adverse. It was a bit of a moment of adversity, they battened down the hatches, didn't they? And did keep them out. Didn't allow the.
And I don't think you could see Leicester and Southampton putting in that sort of display at the moment. And I think that will kind of that perhaps bodes well for next season.
Yeah, and I think Kallum made the point that or you both made the point that we're in a different place to Leicester and Saints in terms of stability.
Yeah,
and one of those moments is let's
Ooh.
talk about it. Is McKenna has made a commitment. Was it to Stuart Watson in the East
It was
Anglian?
tell
us a little bit more about that commitment.
Well, it was
please.
quite a surprise. I think. It's the kind of question that's going to get asked at this once a team's relegation is confirmed or all but confirmed. But I think it's perhaps sort of came as a bit of a surprise that it was asked quite this early, because obviously it's not. As we all kind of know, yes, it's going to happen, but it's not kind of nailed on, is it, in terms of maths and whatever? And he was asked the question, "Are you going to sort of be part of it next year?" And he says, "Yes, I'm happy here." And so we're, touch wood, not going to have the kind of first month or so of the summer, which is all about managerial speculation.
Yeah, because it could have got quite loud, couldn't it?
But having said that, we've kind of talked about this before. Where might Kieran go? What options might he have? Because I don't think he's.
There's way too many dominoes that can fall.
Yeah, I think this is it. It's about dominoes to some degree, but he's more likely to go to a club where another manager has gone.
Yes.
Do we read it as a little bit that it would have to be a very compelling offer now?
I think too much has been made of it.
Right.
I see it as, if the right offer doesn't come in, he's happy to lead the club. He's not going to walk because he doesn't want to manage in the Championship. That's, I think, all it comes down to. I think there's dominoes that could fall. For what it's worth, I don't think they will. My gut tells me he'll still be here. But obviously, it's nice to get the words that we got the other day from the man himself.
Well, he's certainly got a connection with Suffolk now.
Oh,
he loves his walks in Aldeburgh and Southwold, and he's got a connection with the players. It's heartfelt. They were heartfelt when they came over today. It was a strong connection, banging of the chest again, as we like to see from McKenna. So it's good. So let's close out with one sort of final conversation. There's lots of talk around contracts with Burgess and Axel. We've got a lot of noise around Delap, as we know. What is the strategy for the squad going forward? Do you think? What are we? Because it feels to me that we're going to have no central midfield, because I think Morsey is getting too slow now, even for the Championship. Delap's going to go. What's our strategy? We haven't done enough international recruitment as well compared to Wolves, for example. What do you think is going to be the plan this summer?
I don't think it. We'll see what happens with players that leave. For what it's worth, I don't think too many players will leave. I don't think there won't be a mass exodus, for instance. And for that reason, other than a few key areas, I don't think we need to go big. I don't think it'll be a summer, or at least it should be a summer, where we're signing 10, 11, 12 players.
So you're not seeing it as a sort of rebuild summer? You think there can be a continuation?
I think we've got the core of a good group of players that have come up from us last year, and we've recruited this year, obviously with the idea of staying in the division, but we've recruited with the idea that should we go down, there's players in there that will play their part. You look at, should these players not get offers elsewhere and stay, you look at the likes of Jack Clark and Jacob Greaves and players like that. These are all top Championship players who no doubt will have a huge role next season, and they're already in the building. They're already settled at the club. So I don't think it's a case of ripping up the book again. Which
No. What about with you, Phil? I mean,
no, I agree. I agree. I think that we've got players under contract. That's one thing. So if we don't need to sell, we don't need to sell, do we? Delap will go. We'll make 10-ish million, something like that, profit on him. Because obviously there's the relegation clause of 30 million, and Chelsea, Man City will get a 20% of the profit. So yeah, I think he'll go. Burgess, the way that Kieran was talking about, you kind of wonder whether he knows that maybe he is on his way to Girona
in Spain,
in La Liga.
But there's no conclusion on that.
There's not
that
yet.
Was what Kieran said. We're just kind of going off tones.
Well, that's sort of what you have to do at this time, because and also managers don't. When players are out of contract, managers don't know what the discussion is that the player has had with other clubs. Axel again kept his cards quite close to his chest, I thought, when he was talking. Kieran obviously wants to keep both of them because they'll both be excellent servants in in the Championship. Axel, you could probably see him getting a Premier League club. You know, I think he's done well. The only question might be over his fitness, but. Other than a couple of hamstrings, the main issue he's had with his hand, and he kind of talked about that.
Was a washing up bowl,
and he said that was part of probably why he had the hamstring injuries, because he got into a nice rhythm and he kind of stopped and then picked. So yes, it'll be interesting. But I do agree with Kallum that overall you don't see hatloads of players moving on. I think you probably see people like Massimo Luongo move on because he's probably just at the end of the kind of cycle, really, isn't he? Yeah. He's of an age now, and central midfield is the area where we desperately need to bring players in, players with legs, a bit more athleticism. Flynn Downs was one that was looked at in January, so I'd certainly probably take. And I don't think he's happy at Southampton. Again, might change a bit there because there's a new manager coming in, isn't there? But so yeah, I think. Players like Jack Clark, players like Jacob Greaves, Philogene once he's fit again, are all players that were very good performers in the Championship and are a year or so on, having played some games in the Premier League. So they'll obviously have benefited from that and will be better players.
I guess the strategy point is, do we go a bit more international, which is something that we've not been doing? And the second point on the strategy is, you're trying to buy with growth for the Premier League. So I guess you're looking for people who can be successful in the Championship, but potentially also grow into the Premier League position, which is maybe some of the purchases this summer haven't quite made that Premier League jump.
No, they haven't.
Like Greaves or Jack Clark.
Might they? Yeah. There's nothing to say that they won't make that leap next time we're up. If the season next year goes as well as we hope it will they then have be that bit older, that bit more kind of, if Kieran's still around, instilled, have the kind of way the team plays that instilled in them that bit more. They will grow as players. I mean, Philogene, for example, is still 23, isn't he? So he's not played a huge amount of games, has he, over his career? No. Even for 23. The goalkeeper, obviously, we signed in January. He was pretty much the best goalkeeper in the Championship, I think,
and has worked out really well. It's been a great bit of business.
Well. So yeah, and squad wise, you look at people like Connor Townsend, who are top Championship players. Yeah. So. Yeah, I think across the squad there are Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson never played in the Championship. He's played all his football, his 50th Premier League appearance,
and he seems to be revelling in getting some game time.
So I mean, again, how will he do? He'll be a very good player in the Championship. So I think kind of we look at that, and there's obvious areas we have to strengthen. Delap, we'll need a replacement, but of course George Hurst is an experienced Championship player. So yeah,
we'll see where we go. We've got another exciting summer to look at. There's going to be lots of talking points as we go through. It's going to be
still more games,
and more games to play. And actually, now we're in relaxed video verdict mode, where we know our fate. We know we're back down to the Championship. So we're going to enjoy these games. And frankly, if the games are like that today, chaps, we'll have a good end to the season, because I thought it was a really cracking, entertaining game. And thanks so much for your time, chaps, and your insights.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for tuning in to TWTV. And we'll be back again after the Arsenal game at Portman Road. Thanks again, and please, as always, like and subscribe.